1 John 3:16 through 18 reads, "This is how we've come to know love. He laid down his life for us. We should also lay down our lives for our brothers. If anyone has this world's goods and sees his brother in need but closes his eyes to his need, how can God reside in him? Little children, we must not love with words or speech, but with truth and action." This is a very deep and rich in meaning verse that we need to expound on quite a bit in order to see, first, how does it affect the original audience that this verse was given to when it was written. Next, we need to look into what does it actually mean in the whole of the construct of the Bible, and how does it apply throughout the Bible. And lastly, we need to see what it actually means to us. So to take this first step, we need to look at what does it actually say. Well, one of the big questions that we have to ask is, does this verse fit with other verses in the Bible? And clearly it does. John, the author of this verse, is also the author of the book of John. And in John 15:13, Jesus' words are recorded here of saying, "No one has greater love than this, than that somebody would lay down his life for his friend." Now, if we take this a step further, we can also look into John 13:34, where Jesus is saying, "I give you this new commandment, love one another. Just as I have loved you, you must also love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another also." Now, to go into detail of these three verses, by using the verses to expound upon 1 John 3:16, it seems like there's a central theme, and that theme is that we really need to have love for each other. It goes into another translation of the John 13:34, where Jesus is saying you should love your neighbors as yourself. And I think that this is really key. During the time that this verse, 1 John 3:16 through 18, was written, people were very, let's use the word cliquey. They essentially stayed in their own class. Poor people were with poor people, the Pharisees were with the Pharisees, and the different work groups pretty much stayed to themselves. And that was set that way because of a system that was set up during the Jewish times of clean versus unclean. So understanding that there was this class of people that the Jewish leadership saw as unclean means that they saw people as less than themselves. And see, what Jesus is actually talking about here through the Apostle John is that nobody is above one another. Everybody should love each other equally. And what this comes down to is that the Pharisees, who were so holy, would walk past a blind man or walk past a homeless person, and in pretense they were the rich people. They were the billionaires of this era, only back in their time, and they would walk past somebody that was poor and in need, all the while going out and saying how holy they were, how righteous they were, how above these, this filth, this scum of the earth was. When in reality, their sins were just as great, and their filth was just as exposed to Jesus as what they perceived as filth was for these homeless people. Now, if we take it a step further, we're going to have to look into what this verse actually truly means. And to do that, I'd like to take a look at what the Holman Christian Standard Life Application Study Bible actually has to say this, is that real love is really an action. It's not a feeling. Love is not, this mushy thing that we get inside of us. Love is an action. It's actually putting ourselves above somebody else. It's producing a selfless, sacrificial giving. And sometimes that sacrificial giving has to come with a sacrifice. And in our case, the sacrifice that paid the debt for our sin was Jesus Christ himself. And what this is actually saying is that we have to be willing to give all the way to that particular sacrifice of our own lives for somebody else. So what it comes down to is that we have a situation where we might tomorrow, going into what this actually means for us, tomorrow we might walk past a homeless person. Well, so if we're driving a nice car and we have, nice things, or even if they're not the greatest things, but yet we pass by that person, John, through this verse, is actually telling us that how can the world see the love of God residing in us if we're unwilling to give of ourselves of somebody that the world sees as the least of these? You see, God views this whole situation differently. He doesn't see the least of these. He sees my child, my blessed one, my son, my daughter, the one that Jesus loves. And that's the whole meaning of this verse. That's the whole purpose. That's where it connects from the original audience to us, is that God is trying to tell us that, hey, yes, society looks at these people this way, but I love that person. And because I love that person, so should you. And this is a great reality check, especially even for me individually, going into, really connecting it and really showing the meaning that it has for us. I work with a lot of homeless people with my church. I go into the homeless shelters. We do dinner services as well as several other things. But yet, I'm even guilty of seeing a homeless person that I might work with the third Sunday of the month with our local outreach service, but yet, because I'm the type of person who never carries cash with me, never carries gift cards with me or anything else, I will pass by that homeless person. The same homeless person that I've worked with. And what the Bible's telling us is that we really need to stop doing that. We need to look ahead and say, hey, we may very well go out today and have an interaction with a homeless person, with somebody that, society sees as the least of these, but God sees that person as his child. And we need to love them like we love ourselves. I think that the key here is just that, is understanding what love really is. And I mean, we can look into other verses, the 2 Corinthians, and describing what love really gets down to. That love is patient, love is kind, love, does not boast, it does not envy. And we could see all that, and we could literally take the word love out and put God in every one of those spots and say that God is patient, God is kind. Well, if God is patient with us and God is kind to us, then we need to also be kind to our fellow man. And I think that that's what really wraps up this whole verse, is that, we as his little children must not love with words or speech, but love with truth and action. And that's the heart of what this is saying, is that, it's easy to say, hey, I love you. No, I love you. But to actually go out of our way to actually show love in action is something that most of us, it's outside of our comfort zone. We really don't want to go there. Oh, well, it's good for some. No. That's actually what John is telling us here, is that every single one of us needs to make this a priority in our lives. And I think that once we do that, we'll have a rich, fuller, and better understanding of what God actually came to do, what Jesus, and took on the form of man, came here to do, and that was to bless us by giving us a better understanding of who we are in God. And with that, this concludes this conversation. Thanks.